Good evening to all. Is my voice audible to all? Okay. So I have not put any topic in today's class. What I am doing today is, since I have taken almost more than 100 lectures with you people on management on different topics. Now what I have 3 videos for you on management today. Apart from that, I also want to request you that if you have any problem related to any subject till now, whatever I have taught you, so you can come up with the questions, or if there is any topic which you are not able to understand, you can discuss those topics with me one by one. Whatever problems you have, whatever topic that I have already taught to you, or whatever queries and questions you have related to management. So today's class is on that. So I want that either I should discuss the videos one by one I have with videos that I have with me right now. Either I should discuss that, or second thing, if you have some questions pertaining to management till now related to any subjects, whether it's IT management, whether it's supply chain management, whether it's ERP, whether it's marketing, operations, HR, any topic. So it's MIS, any topic. So you can just go ahead and ask your questions. Write down in the chat box one by one. I can explain you those stuffs. Or I should play the video and discuss the topic which I want to discuss today with you. Okay? So do you have questions, anybody? Sandeep, Rajiv, Monachan, Rezi, Lakshmi, Kelvin. I want answers from you on the chat box. Do you have any questions? Anybody of you? Rajiv says not from me. What about others? Sandeep says no. Monachan, Rezi, Lakshmi, Kelvin. Monachan says no. Rezi, Lakshmi, Kelvin. Okay, Rezi says no. Lakshmi and Kelvin. Kelvin says no. Lakshmi. Okay. So I think all of you have no questions. Okay. So let's discuss the video one by one today.
As a continuation from our previous discussion about strategic issues, from whatever list you create when working with the organization, we need to then ask these questions to clarify. What is the real issue, conflict, or dilemma? Why is it an issue? What aspect causes the issue? And who says it's an issue? Because maybe it is for some and not for others. What are the consequences of not doing anything? Can we actually do something about that issue? Can issues be eliminated or combined? Because remember, we can't spread ourselves too wide, too broad. That'll cause problems. Does an issue need to be separated into 2 or more issues? Is it one department? Is it an issue for one department or across departments? And just as we have a department of why and continually look at the purpose of what we're doing, what are we missing in this? Strategic issues show us the gaps where bridges need to be built to either reach our goals or fulfill the vision, depending on which tack the organization has taken. And at times, that means that the strategy has to be very broad because the environment is changing so rapidly, being too specific will hinder outcomes. A direct quote from Bryson, a strategy may be thought of as a pattern of purposes, policies, programs, actions, decisions, and or resource allocations that define what an organization is, what it does, and why it does it. Strategy, therefore, is an extension of the organization or the community's mission, forming a bridge between the organization and its environment. Henry Mintzberg wrote in the Harvard Business Review in 1994 about the rise and fall of strategic planning. The full article is in the doc sharing folder if you want to read it. Mintzberg identified 4 aspects of strategy in the above graphic. Intended strategy is strategy as conceived by the top management team. Even here, rationality is limited. And the intended strategy is the result of a process of negotiation, bargaining, and compromise involving many individuals and groups within the organization. However, realized strategy, the actual strategy that is implemented, is only partly related to what was intended. Mintzberg suggests that only 10 to 30% of intended strategy is actually accomplished. The primary determinant of realized strategy is what Mintzberg terms emergent strategy, the decisions that emerge from the complex processes in which individual managers interpret the intended strategy and adapt to changing external circumstances. Thus, the realized strategy is a consequence of both deliberate and emerging factors. And of course, a couple of direct quotes from Mintzberg here. Strategic planning is not strategic thinking. One is analysis, the other is synthesis. Real strategic change requires inventing new categories, not just rearranging the old ones. There are a number of ways to think about strategy, and we briefly touched on patterns already. With position, we're determining where the organization exists now in the marketplace and where we'd like to be in the future. Perspective planning relies heavily on organizational culture and would require a culture measurement tool. Osborne and Plastrick's book, Banishing Government, 1997 Perseus Books, discusses 5 key strategies of which the organization would only choose one. A core strategy sets clear goals and defines accountability. A consequence strategy creates new incentive systems. A customer strategy includes customers and competitors. A control strategy determines where decision-making power resides. And finally, a cultural strategy creates new, non-bureaucratic practices and processes within the organization for better efficiencies. Often using a strategy as the plan by identifying opportunities is not enough on its own to achieve the organizational objectives. Developing strategies as a posture or a ploy is simply a means of blocking your competitors. Strategies to address the issues we previously determined need to focus on addressing the new rules, design, concepts, changes, technologies, whatever's going to change within the organization. Creating processes that allow that activity to happen. Controlling strategy delivery. Delivering future capabilities, and maintaining and enhancing stakeholder relations, the most important aspect. There are 4 basic levels of strategy creation. Remember, though, that most important aspect. There are 4 basic levels of strategy creation. Remember, though, that strategies aren't tactics. Tactics or action items are short-term activities underneath the strategies that determine our purpose. Though, as Mintzberg wrote in 1994, the trouble with the strategy-tactics distinction is that one can never be sure which is which until all the dust is settled. Strategy levels would start at the whole organization level, then move to subunits and individual program, service, or process strategy, and then, of course, operations, the functions that keep the organization running on a day-to-day basis. As we look at Bryson's 10-step map again, the purpose of strategy formulation and plan development is to make sure that our strategies clearly link together and link the organization to the community and the environment in ways that create enduring significant value. Let me repeat that, because if we're not creating value, what's the point? We're looking to create enduring significant value. This slide comes directly from Dr. Bryson, and if we start with understanding the social needs and the stakeholders and their interests, we then engage in strategic leadership within the organization, and then within the livelihood scheme or the business model of the organization, we're of course pursuing meaningful missions, and we're building and drawing on our core and distinctive competencies, but that helps us pursue competitive and collaborative advantages. Collaboration, particularly among nonprofits these days, is required. We employ coherent and effective strategies within the organization and our operations that produce desirable results, secure needed resources, and cultivate support and legitimacy. And as you can see from the arrows, it's all interrelated. We are numbered 1 through 9 here, but that doesn't mean that they actually flow always in a 1 to 9 order. Many of times, of course, if you haven't secured the resources, you can't do the activities. 5 key questions that we need to ask in our strategy formulation is, what are the practical alternatives, dreams, or visions we might pursue to address this issue and achieve this goal? What are the barriers to realizing these alternatives, dreams, or visions? What major proposals might we pursue to achieve these visions or to overcome the barriers? What major actions within existing staff job descriptions must be taken to implement the proposals? If we're creating new jobs and we need to hire more people, that's a whole different tactic. And what specific steps must be taken in the next 6 months to get us where we want to be? And again, we always continue to funnel down and to increase focus. What's really reasonable? Where can we combine proposals, actions, and specific steps? Do any proposals, actions, or specific steps contradict each other? And if so, what are we going to do about that before we start implementation? What, including resources, are we or key implementers really willing to commit to in the next year? Because if there is no commitment and follow-through, again, there's no sense in doing it. What are the specific next steps that would have to occur in the next 6 months for this strategy to work? Sang, 1990, defines the learning organization as an organization that possesses not only an adaptive capacity, but also generativity, as he calls it. That is, the ability to create alternative futures. Sang identifies 5 disciplines that a learning organization should possess. Team learning, which is an emphasis on the learning activities of the group rather than on the development of a team process. Shared visions, the ability to unearth shared pictures of the future that foster genuine commitment and enrollment rather than compliance. We've talked about that previously. Mental models, deeply held internal images of how the world works. Personal mastery, continually clarifying and deepening personal vision, focusing energies, developing patience, and seeing reality objectively. And again, that follows right along with Daniel Pink's work. And system-wide thinking, the ability to see interrelationships rather than linear cause and effect chains. Watkins and Marsick, both in 1993 and 1996, originally defined the learning organization as one that is characterized by continuous learning for continuous improvement and by the capacity to transform itself. This definition captures a principle, but in and of itself is not operational. What does it look like when learning becomes an intentional part of the business strategy? People become aligned around a common vision. They sense and interpret their changing environment. They generate new knowledge which they use in turn to create innovative products and services to meet customer needs. Watkins and Marsick identified 7 action imperatives that characterize companies traveling towards learning organizational goals, but they have 3 key components. They are systems-level continuous learning across the organization, not just in vertical or in certain spots. And that is created in order to create and manage knowledge outcomes, which 3 lead to improvement in the organization's performance and ultimately the organizational value as measured through both financial assets and non-financial intellectual capital. Learning helps people to create and manage knowledge that builds a system's intellectual capital. From your Bryson text, the learning organization is developing a hierarchy of ideas from the more abstract values and mission to the concrete strategies, tactics, actions. Understanding the connection between values and assertions, beliefs. These are not necessarily the same thing. Using strategic planning as a component of a learning organization, continuous improvement. The next 3 slides are a process that flows together, beginning with our organizational values that validate our goals, from which we create the issues that we need to work on, which exist in the context of possible options and are supported by our assertions. As we go through the strategic planning process, we agree upon the organizational values and decide upon the goals, exploring strategic issues, discussing in context the options, the content, the actions, and the assertions from which we base our decisions. As we continue to move through the process, our values are served by our goals, achieved by our strategies through agreed-upon activities that, again, are supported by our assertions. As a graphic, we look at where we are, start a strategic planning process that leads us to where we want to be, and we're continually measuring and revising the strategic plan, which is a living, breathing document. Miles and Snow in 1978 described 3 types of individuals within the organization. Prospectors continually search for market opportunities and regularly experiment with potential responses to emerging environmental trends. Defenders devote primary attention to improving the efficiency of their current operations and aren't looking for other opportunities. Reactors seldom make adjustments of any sort until forced to do so by environmental pressure. Dr. Bryson lists categories of outcomes from strategic planning efforts that you should see, from the intangible to the tangible, or the invisible to the visible. And tangible results that you should see are documented commitments to work programs indicating steps, procedures, contacts, deliverables, stakeholder involvement in the process, data collection and analysis process and procedures, and procedural requirements and expectations. On the content side, you should see an adopted strategic plan that spells out context, mission and vision, philosophy, values, goals, objectives, performance measures, strategies, action plans, budgets, and how we're going to measure, how we're going to evaluate the processes that we're going to undertake. On the more intangible side, there are still benefits of strategic planning to the organization and to the community. Widespread appreciation of stakeholders and relationships, including value positions, interests, and political and psychological needs. Productively, how to work together. Effective conflict management processes, improvements to organizational culture, how we think about and do things around here. Uncertainties about relationships, values, and the environment get reduced dramatically, and the requirements for achieving legitimacy. On the content side, we should get widespread appreciation and commitment to the mission, vision, values, philosophy, strategies, and other key plan elements of the organization by not only senior leadership, but major employee groups and other key stakeholders. Now, strategy mapping as an exercise is a highly effective tool, though often the maps become too large to fit into any readable PowerPoint, as you can see from this example. Although the specific client here has been removed, this is a real strategy map for a large healthcare organization with multiple locations. Just from a surface glance, you can see in the upper left mission, vision, and an overarching organizational goal and the values. Although I've blanked out the vision because in this slide it lists the specific organization, we can see that the mission is living the gospel and witnessing God's grace while collaboratively leading people to healthier and more meaningful lives. And there's a goal to create thriving, vibrant, faith-based retail centers and outreach activities where individuals from all walks of life come to grow spiritually while enjoying experiences and products that promote healthy living. And then the values of the organization: faith, integrity, nurture, excellence, service, and team. And out of the goal, there is a specific measure, though the metrics are to be determined here. And they have a brand that they're working with as well. And the strategic imperative, if we were going into deep detail, is listed right there. As you move from left to right across a larger strategy map, you can see that the organization has chosen 5 key strategies to focus on: collaboration, presence, people, product, and finance. Each of those then has a measurement so we can see how we're actually doing against the plan. This process for this particular organization has been going on for 6 months, in part because we're talking about a very large organization with multiple division heads and departments in multiple service locations. They will continue to meet monthly until they narrow down the specific initiatives that will fit beneath the strategies and the measurements and the metrics that will be used to guide the process and the decision making. Remember that strategic thinking, acting, and learning are more important than a particular approach. Bryson has several points regarding the process design and the action plans, beginning on page 245 of the most recent edition of the book, the 4th edition, but we're just going to touch on a couple of key points here. Evaluate the alternatives prior to implementation. Are the alternatives politically acceptable? Are they administratively and technically workable? Are they results-oriented? What are we measuring? How are we measuring it? And will it tell us what we need to know? And are they legally, ethically, and morally defensible? That concludes this session on formulating strategy. Thanks for listening.
This video basically tells you about the strategic management initiatives which is being taken within the organization from top level management to the lower level management, how strategy is being framed, whether it's IT department, finance department, HR department, operations department, how we worked on the strategies at every level, whether we are starting a new project or we are taking a new initiative or we are hiring an employee. So at every level you need to have a strategy in place. So this video basically tells you about how we devise those strategies. So do you all enjoy this video on strategic management? Any queries, anybody? Okay, so let's play another video for you. Just request everybody to be on time in the class. Some of the people have joined late in the class today. So be on time, please. This is what I have done, Prabha. I have just explained you what is this video is on. This video is on strategic management, how the strategies are being framed by the top management, whether it's a top management people or it's a project manager or department-wise strategies. So we need to devise different strategies that how we can get it implemented. For example, if you have been allocated some project to work on and you are the project head. Now you want to get that project completed on time. Now what strategy you frame? You need to hire employees for that. You need to have engineers for that. You need to have software developers for that. You need to have a testing team for that who can test that particular module which you have developed. You need to interact with business team. For that you need to have a business analyst. So these are all strategies. You need to be calculative also, that so as to decide that how much money is to be spent on whom, because you have been allocated a budget and you have to complete that project within that particular budget in a defined timeline. So for that you need to frame strategies. You need to sit, you need to work on a day-to-day basis how much the project is being completed, whether it's 20% complete, 40% complete, and you have to keep on telling to your stakeholders that you people are working hard on the project and this is the progress report and that particular project will be going to complete on time. So for that, for all those stuffs to move smoothly, you need to have a strategy in place. So this video is pertaining to that. Okay, Prabha? Okay.
Module 4, which is Project Integration Management. This is a very critical module when it comes to the preparation from the PMP perspective. And why critical is because
All right, again, thank you everyone for coming today, and I'd like to turn this presentation over to Peter Mintz, who's going to be hosting us through creating a business plan. Peter?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Rachel. I assume, am I coming in clear enough for everybody?
Yes, sir. You sound great.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us with this presentation of how to create a business plan. As Rachel said, my name is Peter Mintz. I'm both a TAB facilitator here in Westchester, New York, and also the president of Fleetwood Research, which provides a variety of services to small businesses. One of my specialties is in helping small, private, and public companies create and implement business plans. So today, I am going to share some of my knowledge and experience about the process. Some of you may be familiar with parts of the process, but hopefully I can fill in some of the steps and information you may be missing. As Rachel said, I'll stop a couple of times for questions and then take questions at the end. If everything goes according to plan, the presentation should take just a little bit over 40 minutes. So as you see here, this is creating a business plan. This is a concept of from idea to implementation, and it is how to create a professional business plan for any size organization. And let me see. There we go. Okay, having a little trouble moving the slides, but we got it now. Okay, so the first question everybody asks is, why are you writing a business plan? Well, first, every organization needs a plan in order to operate effectively. The Small Business Administration is given their own little blurb about why you should do it, and I'll just summarize it here, saying it basically is to define your business, identify the goals, serves as a resume, helps you allocate resources, handle unforeseen complications, make good business decisions. It'll also be important if you're borrowing money. A lot of people doing this predominantly creating a plan for raising money. And additionally, it'll help inform salespeople, suppliers, and others about your operations and goals. So what are some of the reasons, more specifically, to write a business plan? Well, first, the plan is necessary for probably the main reason people undertake it, is attracting investors and raising capital. Usually it's a requirement for certain professional investors that they must see a business plan. But it can also be good for establishing valuation parameters for things like mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures. It could also help establish operational and financial benchmarks. If you're looking for a new top management person, a CEO, a CFO, it'll help attract them. It'll give them some idea what the company's about. And it'll also maintain some of your top staff if they have a better understanding of where you are with your business and what you're trying to do with it. It'll also help you to enter any promising new markets, or if it turns out you're in a market that's declining, it'll help you have a path from which to exit that. And it's going to give you a basic structure from which to grow and prosper. So how do you start the process? Well, the first thing to do, if you haven't already, and every business should have at least this, is to write a mission statement. Just a few paragraphs. And you're going to focus on some of the major issues. First, obviously, what is the business about? What are the market parameters? What products or services are you offering? Who are the customers and clients? What is the unmet need that you are there to meet? What are the factors that differentiate you from everyone else who may be in the market? And at this point, you don't really have to worry about it being perfect or concise. You just want to make sure you get those key points out and cover the most important points about your business. Okay, so we've got that done. You've done the mission statement. Now you want to create a basic outline or table of contents. And here's the basic structure. You can obviously deviate from this, but it's good to start with this. First is going to be an executive summary. Then you're going to have a background. Then you're going to talk about your products and services. And then you're going to talk about the operations. Obviously, some of that, the products and services and the operations, may overlap a bit, particularly for a service company. You want to talk about the market and the industry. Within that, you want to talk about the competition, who's out there, who may be out there. And you want to talk about how the company's organized and who's running it. You need to focus on your strategy. And then you have to do finances and the projections. And you really should create some separate spreadsheets, which you will share some of with the plan, but you want to have a whole set of financial projections. You want to talk about some risk factors, and then at the end, whatever is left, you want to put in the appendix. So I'm going to kind of go through this kind of section by section and explain what it is that should go in each section. So the very first thing to do is you want to understand the industry. So you want to find out who are the closest existing or potential competitors. You want to try and find as many public competitors as possible because there's a lot of information about them that will help you understand where companies are within the industry. You want to look at their websites, review their financial documents. Obviously, if it's a private company, you're going to have a lot of difficulty getting finances. Some of the larger companies, you may be able to get some, but there's not going to be a lot there. But if it's a public company, they produce all kinds of financial documents. The most important of these is the 10K. It's almost kind of the yearly Bible of the company, and it's basically a very expanded annual report which gives you all the details about the company. All companies must file those, and they're all available to everybody. You want to review the industry trade journals. You want to make sure, even if you think you know everything, to make sure you know the current terms and vernacular. You don't want to come across as not completely understanding where your industry is and what's going on with it. Make sure you know those terms and you probably want to make a list of those. Make sure that they're in there in the plan for later use. And then you want to make a list of the advantages and disadvantages of each of the major competitors and probably compare them to your own. Okay, now writing the plan, you should do it section by section. Everybody has their own way of doing it. I personally think that the best way is to start with the financial section. I have been a financial analyst. I teach finance, so maybe I'm a little bit biased in that end, but I really believe that is the cornerstone of the entire plan. You absolutely will need to create projections. How detailed they have to be, that's a different story. But you have to give some sort of projection so you understand and your readers and potential investors understand where the firm is going. If you do this right, the majority of the text in the plan will simply describe many of the items presented in the financial section. Once the financials are done, you go back and you do the rest of the plan in order, like backgrounds, products, etc. So we'll start with the background. The background gives a very quick overview of the company. It includes things like, obviously, the incorporation, the address. You're going to want to put together your mission and a little bit more on your general strategy. You want to put together a little bit of the history. You don't have to go through everything that's happened with the company, but when you started and any major milestones that have occurred. You want to make sure that you give the current structure and where are the facilities, who are the employees. The background, there's going to be a lot of redundancy with other things in the plan and other sections, so 1-2 pages at most. You really don't need to do more than that, no matter what kind of business you have. Products or services, you want to start with a brief overview of the basic portfolio of the products or services, as well as your target customers. Right? You want to make sure that when you're doing this, that the descriptions of your products and services are consistent. Okay? On your websites, nowadays, very important, brochures, and any other marketing materials, you want to make sure that what's in your plan is consistent with everything else that you are presenting to potential investors and to the public. Add pricing and cost information. Okay, that's not necessarily in the other documents. You have to have this in the business plan. You don't have to have every single pricing point, but you've got to give some general outline of how it works. You want to add details on the specific customer target for each product or service. And the length of the section is really dependent on the breadth of portfolio and type of products. If you have a lot of different products, you've got to describe each one of them, or each of the one of the major classes. If you have one basic product, this may be simple, or one basic service. Again, this does not have to be a spec sheet. You do not have to put in every single thing about the product, the size, and all kinds of other important things that you might have on a spec sheet. You don't have to have that in there, but it should give a very basic but concise definition of what the products are about. Now we move on to the operations. And again, depending on the business, in particular the service and the operations may be very similar, but this describes a little bit more. It's to describe how the products and services are created, and it includes a little bit about the day-to-day operations. For instance, sales and marketing. It's possible that the sales and marketing may be so critical you may create a whole separate section for it. But at very least, you've got to discuss it within the operations section. How are orders processed? Manufacturing and assembly, the quality control, the packaging, the shipping and or the delivery, customer service, returns, and then you're also going to talk about staffing and administrative support. Obviously, a lot of this is directed at companies that do have products and services, and you use what applies. But it turns out that a lot of things, staffing, administrative report, customer service, those are all important no matter what type of firm you have. Okay, so continue with the operations. Each section, if needed, should be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Right? If a page or more is needed for instance, sales and marketing, you might want to create a separate section. Right? Here's one caveat. This is not a day-to-day operations manual, but it can serve as a basis from which to create one if you haven't already done that. So I'm going to go on to the financials here. Right? I may be skipping around a little bit, but I want to make sure we get a few minutes extra on how the financials work. First, you create the projections. That we've already talked about. That needs to be done before you even start the plan. You want to make sure you have the historical financials and the different reporting categories, and you use that as a skeleton for going forward and creating the projections. And yes, as I put in there, you absolutely must have some kind of projections. All right? In a good financial section, you're going to create the profit and loss or income statement, the statement of operations, and maybe even a cash flow statement if it's relevant. You want to start with the old financials, assuming they exist. Of course, if it's a startup business, there are no historicals. You want to create monthly statements for the next 24 months. Beyond that, quarterly for the third year, and then possibly if you're going beyond third-year projections, you can just do what the projection is for year 4 and year 5. You may not need to go into that detail. Most likely, you'll need to create some sort of revenue table that explains how revenue is generated, pricing models, etc. So you may have to create a separate one for that. If you don't have a history, or even if you do, you want to make sure you start with a set of specific assumptions about core parameters. For instance, we use the old favorite, the widget. For product pricing, you might want to put it's $10 for an A widget, $15 for a B widget, and if someone is buying the widget package, the AB package, that's $20. Unit costs, you want to talk about, well, generally it's $5 for a widget, whatever it is for an A widget, whatever it is for a B widget. If you have known overhead costs, rent, salaries, you really got to put some detail in there. All right, and there may be some unknown costs too. You're just going to have to make some assumptions. Marketing, research and development if it's appropriate. And then you want to talk about growth rates, right? At least month to month for the first 2 years. Ultimately, you're going to want to create 6 to 8 sheets. Again, this depends on the breadth of the business and how much financial information you have. The assumptions first. The end, you want to put a 5-year summary. You want a 24 to 36 month profit and loss or income statement. You want 12 to 24 months of a balance sheet and 12 to 24 months of a cash flow statement. You want to put in the ownership. Who owns the company? Who are the major owners in the company? Capital expenditures is going to be very critical. You want to put those in, if any. Obviously, if it's a service company, there are going to be little to no capital expenditures. And then, since a lot of people are writing this to potentially raise money, you want to put in the use of proceeds, all right, assuming that is appropriate. General rules, you don't have to be exact with these, but really you want to try to get that the first year's projections you can get within a 10% variance. And I know there are a lot of companies that say, I don't know what it's going to be. You know, who knows? It could be $500,000, it could be $1 million, it could be $20 million. Usually you can get some sort of reasonable variance. And as you do projections, you get better and better with them. The second year, it's okay if it's off by about 20%. After that, what you're looking at that point in the third year is you're looking at good growth from the second year, both in revenue and earnings. The fourth year and beyond, if you do that, you're worrying less about the changes versus each year versus capturing a percentage of the market. When you get out to the fourth, fifth year, if you want to go beyond that, you really talk about what kind of market share can you capture within your industry. You want to start conservative. You definitely want to get as close as you can to that 10% variance, so it's okay first year if you go a little bit under. But you want to be relatively optimistic. Now, a lot of people think you should have several sets of projections, and you may follow that. I don't agree, because in the end, you're only doing one set of financials. You're only going to have one track record. So you might as well put together your best assumptions and be confident about it. In terms of writing them, you want to break the financial section down into an overview. You want to talk about how revenue is generated and the key assumptions. You want to talk about key costs. You want to talk about your capital expenditures, if any, current balance sheet description, the need for capital, use of proceeds. We went over some of these. And then what you want to do is you want to insert portions of the spreadsheet projections when it's relevant. You don't need all of the financials to be in the core of the business plan. I know I spent a minute on this, but I want to do a final word on the projections. You want to present the financials in a format that follows GAAP as closely as possible. GAAP being generally accepted accounting principles, and clearly your accountant will be able to help you with that. Use the format found in the 10Ks, if you can, for those companies as close to being the comparables or the competitors to your business as possible. Comparable competitors, by the way, is a similar industry, similar products and services, and comparables are going to be similar structural components. So I guess at this point, I'll make a quick stop here. Are there any...
The conference has been unmuted.
Are there any questions?
And everyone is unmuted, so if you have questions, now would be a wonderful time. Any questions before we proceed?
Okay.
All right.
Should I?
Go ahead, Peter.
All right. We'll go back to continuing with this. Okay. So let's move on to the next section. Here you're talking about the market and the industry. Very critical. You want to start with a brief overview of the market, its history, and the competition. You want to discuss the macro first. What's the general market parameters? What are the largest existing or potential competitors? Then you want to talk about how is the market expected to change over the next few years. You want to find some major industry sources, if you can, to at least have some quotes. Frost & Sullivan happens to be a research firm that covers a lot of firms. IDC is more of a technical one. You want to see if there are any major research sources that cover your industry. Look at the market. You look at the industry competitors. Let's move on to the next section. Here you're talking about the market and the industry. Very critical. You want to start with a brief overview of the market, its history, and the competition. You want to discuss the macro first. What's the general market parameters? What are the largest existing or potential competitors? Then you want to talk about how is the market expected to change over the next few years. You want to find some major industry sources, if you can, to at least have some quotes. Frost & Sullivan happens to be a research firm that covers a lot of firms. IDC is more of a technical one. You want to see if there are any major research sources that cover your industry. Look at the market. You look at the industry competitors. They will help you to find the appropriate sources. And then look at any market or industry associations. So after you complete the macro components, you might want to focus a little bit on the micro. You want to present the details of specific competitive environment to the subject company. Here it's okay if you talk about management's outlook. All right, what management thinks is going to happen to the market. You don't necessarily have to have every portion of this have quoted sources. Make sure that both the demographic and geographic considerations are addressed. People want to know, are you staying within the United States? Are you going international? Explain the competitive edge that can help the company gain at least 5 to 10% of a market position. And clearly, that's what investors ultimately want. They want to know that you can gain a reasonable market position, even if that market position is just within a certain area, a certain region. And if this is probably a good place if you want to put in charts, graphs, tables, this is a good place to put it in. On the competition, you want to outline the companies that are the closest possible competitors, and you want 1 or 2 paragraphs on each. And what should be in them? You want to have a general description of the company's products and services, where it ranks in the market or where you think it ranks, its competitive edge, where is it based, what markets does it serve, the recent revenue and earnings, obviously if they're available, the market cap, if it's a public company, that's basically the market capitalization, which is the shares outstanding times the price, and you can very easily find that on all the major financial services pages. Even Yahoo, I happen to use. Yahoo does a fine job with stuff like that. You want to talk about the major financials. Do they have no debt? Do they have lots of debt? Do they have good working capital positions? You don't have to go into a lot of details here, but just a couple of the real key financials. And then you want to look at direct competitive threats or opportunities. For instance, are there opportunities for joint ventures within this market? Then you go over to the management. So no matter how well the plan is written or how strong the market or the industry is, or the infrastructure and finance of the company, it's really worthless, and most people will tell you this, without good people. All right? This is true at all levels, but it's most obvious and most present at the top, the chief executive officer, or the president, chief financial officer, these days chief information officer. These are roles that you have to make sure that you demonstrate you have good people there. Now, again, depending on how much of a management infrastructure you have, you want to look at some of the key management characteristics. You want to make sure there's a proven record of managerial success and experience and background in education and team and leadership abilities. These are the kind of things you want to express to people that the management has. The management section should be 1 to 3, maybe it could be a few more if it's really critical. You want 1 or 2 paragraphs at most on each individual. Clearly the president and or the CEO has to be discussed. Talk about their responsibilities, 1 sentence. All right, the CEO is responsible for overseeing all whatever it is, operations. A little bit about their past work experience, especially for the 5 to 10 years before they join the company. The education it's good to put in, and then awards or any particularly unusual special interest that might be related. Be careful here. There's some types of organizations that may not be as exciting to investors. I mean, I hate to say it, and I don't mean to disparage anyone who's part of the NRA, but that could go over several different ways and may be a plus to some and a negative to others. But if you're chairman of a local Red Cross chapter, that probably is something that could be of value. You should put in some sort of organization start, and this is a good place to do it. Keep it very simple. This is a very simple organization chart, but just put it together in the normal way an organization is put together. An organization chart is put together. The president and CEO, who's under him the CFO, the head of marketing, the head of sales, whatever happens to be there, the chief financial officer, or we put that in, chief information officer, just gives some sort of outline of the way the company is structured. Then we move on to the strategy. You want to start with a basic mission statement. Again, we wrote that already. And the overall strategy. What is it to be the leading widget manufacturer distributor for the highest quality widgets used for major industrial applications? I'm not going to go through all the details. Something like this, relatively simple, concise, and to the point. All right. Then you want the short-term strategy. What do you want to do over the next short-term period? Well, the next 2 to 3 years, you want to double revenue. And how are you going to do that? You're going to do distribution operations, Eastern Europe, Asia, Australia, etc. I understand that a lot of companies are a little bit small in that and not having global distribution, but it may be that you're trying to go and expand within regions that are local to where your business is. Okay. In terms of the short-term strategy, you could outline it kind of like this. You want to have the marketing in general, the advertising, any employee retention programs, product maintenance, trade shows, etc. You want to put some of this stuff in here so people understand how you deal with that. In terms of the longer-term strategy, and that's 3 to 5 years beyond, be bold and be confident about it. People want to know about your business, invest in your business because you're going someplace. But just make sure that there's a certain reality framework. Like, for instance, to become the leading manufacturer of markets and widgets in North America and Europe and establish a growing share in other target regions. We don't have to do more than that. But it is okay to dare to dream a little bit in this. All right? And that's what we say here. It's okay to be aggressive here as long as there is a basis and a well thought out and documented plan to achieve these goals. All right? Make sure you keep it credible. That's very, very important. I'm going to make a quick stop here. Are there any questions that...
The conference has been unmuted.
Any questions people have, this is a good place to stop, and then we'll go into the final turn here.
It's great so far. No questions here.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the question or the comment of no questions. Okay. Well, again, I'll open it up at the end, and hopefully we seem to be on track here. So If there are any questions, then I'll be happy to take them. So, Rachel, I'm going to continue again, if that's okay with you.
Fine by me.
Okay. All right. So, we've talked about management, market, and industry. Talked about the major sections, finances, of course. Now you have to add, in this day and age, you have to add risk factors. Okay? If you look at a prospectus for initial public offering, you'll see that the prospectus is X number of pages, 50 or 60, and then they're close to the equivalent of 50 or 60 risk factor pages. That is thanks in part, if not to most extent, to our legal industry. All right, and they prepare a cover-all basis. You know, in the event of nuclear war, your company won't do as well. Okay, you don't have to do all that in a business plan. This is not a legal document. Here, the key is to present the real threats, and you want to emphasize those areas where management must pay particularly keen attention. All right, what are the key areas? Well, clearly, and for a lot of companies writing the business plan, their funding and their access to growth capital. That's critical. One of the major makes or breaks for most companies is whether they can get the capital necessary to grow. Competition is obviously going to be in there. If you're in an industry, if you're making a pharmaceutical, all right, or if you're distributing any food products, legislation, government oversight are going to be critical. Environmental issues, if they apply. I mean, obviously, if you're making something which has, you know, any sort of radioactive wastes or whatever, you know, there aren't a lot of people doing that, but if you do, you got to talk about that. The need for additional management. As the company grows, you're probably going to want to add additional management, and you should address that. Any labor concerns. Lots and lots of companies have all kinds of labor concerns. Doesn't have to be 6 pages out. Just something quick. What are they? Is part of your business unionized? How hard is it to find the right labor? How much skill, what kind of skills are necessary, etc. And that you want to look at any other industry and company-specific concerns that I haven't noticed here. But you want to make sure that you at least cover these ones. Okay, so you're pretty much done with the core of the plan. Then you get to the executive summary. And that really should be the easiest to write. It should be written last. It also may be the most important, because a lot of times all people are going to see is the executive summary. You might go a little over. I find 3 to 5 pages is plenty. All right? Here's a case where plagiarism is good. All right? You don't want to reinvent the wheel. Take the key highlights, the points, the sentences, the short paragraphs from the previous sections, and string them together into a relatively cohesive document. So the strategy section, you wrote 3 to 4 pages on it, summarize it in a paragraph or 2. All right, so all the ideas and concepts in the executive summary should be supported within the core document. You definitely don't want to put anything in the executive summary that doesn't already exist within the document. You want to put some, but the most limited financial information. I usually find a general discussion of how the revenue is generated, a general discussion of costs, and maybe a brief financial summary table. I usually find that something like this, the revenue, the earnings for the next 2 to 3 years, is usually plenty here. Remember, if somebody's interested, they can go back and they can go into the financial section. If they're really interested, they can get your whole set of financial projections, which are on spreadsheets. Okay, and then finally the appendix. There's no new writing here other than some section headings. You may want to have product or service flyers. You definitely want to put any articles about the company in news. You want to put industry research or white papers that are particularly relevant. Here you can have operations photographs or photographs of products or services. This is a good place. You may put some of it in the operations, but you may put other important photographs in here. Careful of the customer distributor list. Clearly you don't want to give away anything proprietary, but if you have major customers who are known, it is worth putting in, you know, who those customers and maybe even some of the distributors are if it's a major part of your business. Technical information, if you want to, you can put it in here. I generally don't advise giving out too much technical information, but there's some things you may want to put in there, and anything else that I haven't thought about that might fit in for your particular company or industry. Keep it reasonable. I mean, you may only have 2 or 3 pages, But usually you find if you put in some flyers, if you put in some research papers, you'll find it pretty easily gets up to 10 pages. You can even get up to 15. I wouldn't go too much more than that. Beyond that, if somebody really wants more information, they're going to contact you and speak to you directly about it. All right, so how should it be structured in terms of length? Here are the sections that I suggested before. This is not, you don't have to worry if you fall on either side of the guideline, but the executive summary, again, 3 to 5 pages, background 1 to 2, products 2 to 5. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here. The longest sections are going to be the market and industry and the financials. So a reasonable plan, if you can do it, and you can do it in a concise manner, 20 pages can be reasonable, up to about 45. That's before the appendix and the separate set of projections. Usually when I'm putting together plans, they usually range somewhere in the range of 30, 35, 40 pages. I have put together 50-page plans, but beyond that, that's just getting, it's honestly getting a little bit too silly, and there's just so much you can give anyone about the company. When you edit the plan, well, one of the things that's the most difficult thing to get in the plan, but you got to find a way, and a lot of people ask for it, and that's passion. You've got to demonstrate some way how strong this business is and how much it means to you, the people who are owning it and running it. Really, the most important reflection is going to be the professional manner in which the plan is prepared and presented. But you can add some bold but carefully placed adjectives and comments. Make sure they can be backed up. Our products are the strongest of this, they're the most durable. They are state-of-the-art, highest quality, industry-leading. You can add some emphasis to them, but just make sure you don't overdo it. All right, you've got to make sure that you can back up any claims. And really, management's commitment expresses the passion. You know, I made up a guy here, Joe Success, founded a widget company, spent 15 years and over $5 million of his personal wealth building the business. That says a lot. If you can say something about how much the management has invested in the company, that will definitely be a way of showing passion. In terms of using the plan, again, you want to create a separate standalone executive summary. It's the beginning of the plan, but in essence, you could use it to send out to people who may potentially be interested. You want to keep the actual spreadsheet projections as a separate document. I find if you have potential interest in the company for whatever reason, usually send out an executive summary. That'll qualify not only investor interest, but anyone else who may be interested in the company, including potential new management. Let them look at this. If they're really interested, they'll ask questions. You say, okay, here's the rest of the document. And then you follow up, as I said, with a full plan as the interest dictates. You want to make sure you review and update with each major change in operation. If you add a major new product or service, if you have a merger or acquisition or a joint venture, if there are major significant management changes, and even if not, every 6 months, you should take a look at it. That doesn't mean you have to reread it and go through every point, but just take a look at it and see, have things changed? Is it worth trying to potentially update some of the plan? You don't want to have a business plan that is 2 or 3 years old. In terms of using the plan, again, you want to create a separate standalone executive summary. It's the beginning of the plan, but in essence, you could use it to send out to people who may potentially be interested. You want to keep the actual spreadsheet projections as a separate document. I find if you have potential interest in the company for whatever reason, usually send out an executive summary. That'll qualify not only investor interest, but anyone else who may be interested in the company, including potential new management. Let them look at this. If they're really interested, they'll ask questions. You say, okay, here's the rest of the document. And then you follow up, as I said, with a full plan as the interest dictates. You want to make sure you review and update with each major change in operation. If you add a major new product or service, if you have a merger or acquisition or a joint venture, if there are major significant management changes, and even if not, every 6 months, you should take a look at it. That doesn't mean you have to reread it and go through every point, but just take a look at it and see, have things changed? Is it worth trying to potentially update some of the plan? You don't want to have a business plan that is 2 or 3 years old. It just is irrelevant. And it really will save you a lot if you try to update it, look at it, at least every 6 months. Spend an hour with it is usually plenty. Who's going to write this plan? Well, ideally, the plan should have a lot of inputs, but one voice. The top people, the president, chairman, CFO, they should all give input to their relevant sections. You may want to consider a professional outsider, preferably someone who has some experience in writing plans that achieve their goals. What's the major goal? Obviously raising capital. And understands the financial information and possibly knows the industry. But you don't have to have someone who's an absolute industry expert, because you're not putting in the entire industry's parameters in here. And a general person who is smart and can understand, can do the research, and you can help them with that. Here are some final thoughts. There are 10 key points to remember. Create the plan section by section. Make the financial serve as a skeleton for the rest of the plan as often as possible, as much as possible. Focus on the integration of the financials with the text. I don't know how many times I have to say this. I also teach, and I teach at the graduate level, and it's amazing to me how many times people do not have perfect English and grammar, but those sort of mistakes are just unacceptable. Make sure the plan is carefully reviewed and everything is perfect in there. It may take you twice as long as it is to write it to make sure it's perfect, but that's critical. You want to simplify as much as possible. Add some passion where you can, as I discussed. Write it as much as possible as if someday you'll become a public company and you'll use this for a 10K or a prospectus. I understand that isn't necessarily an objective for a lot of people and for a lot of small companies, but if you do it with that in mind, it'll make the company seem much more professional. Don't be afraid to revise and rewrite. Get as much feedback as you can. Clearly, there's some things that may be proprietary you don't want to share right away, but anytime you can get feedback, it is worthwhile. And make it a living document. And most importantly, and I guess this is the 11th point to remember, credibility is really everything. All right, so if people are in
So do you all enjoy this video on how to write a business plan? Prabha, you asked me certain questions that I should also discuss. Actually, this class I totally have decided that whatever problems you people have, we will discuss on that. But all you people said that you people have no questions. So that's why I have certain video to share, and I shared that video with you. So just for your understanding, okay, I'll try that. It will not be next time. But see, the Razi is saying this video is informative. So I think in every class, in every video or my text lecture, you have something informative to learn. What my plan is, I want that you should keep on learning something new every time. So that's why I bring lot of study materials from either in the form of presentations or in the form of videos. Just I want that you should have more and more information, either from videos or from my theoretical lectures, presentations. So that is my main motive. That's why I find out something new instead of getting the class boring. So I just try different ways to keep you people engaged with some of the new ways, some of the new things in management, whatever new is going on in management, writing business cases, project management. These are not the part of the syllabus which has been provided to me by IIMTS, but still I put in lot of efforts to search all those matters for you on internet or prepare some presentations on my own, and then I share it on the WizIQ. Yes, I stress on points. In most of the classes I stress on points, but these videos are since very simple, so that's why I just don't feel like discussing on that, because the video itself is very informative and the words they are writing, they are very easy. But still, I take your point as a consideration, and definitely I'll discuss these from next classes. Okay. So I have just texted you something, Prabha. Just reply on that text. See on your chat, I have texted you something. Lakshmi, Kelvin, Prabha, I have texted you something. Just reply on that. So hope everybody have enjoyed today's class. So this brings us to the end of our today's class. We'll be meeting on Monday with new class, new day. So just have a great weekend, everybody, and just enjoy. आ रहे हैं Kelvin, Lakshmi, are you there in the class or have you left? Kelvin, Lakshmi, are you there in the class? Okay. So Kelvin, I have texted you something. Just reply to that. The class is over. If anybody has to leave, they can leave. आ रहे हैं तो